You are listening to Off the Shelf, a podcast by the Conference Board.
Hello, I'm Uwe Schulte, the leader of the Conference Board Global Sustainability Centre, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this edition of Off the Shelf, a book discussion series brought to you by the Conference Board. Today, I will be speaking to John Pabon to discuss his book, Sustainability for the Rest of Us. John Pabon's work focuses on the fields of sustainability, geopolitics, and strategic communications. For the past 15 years, he has advised governments, corporations, and organizations of all sizes. John's global career has taken him from Los Angeles to New York, from Shanghai to Melbourne, and he has been working with the United Nations, McKinsey, AC Nielsen, and as a consultant with BSR, the world's largest sustainability-focused business network. A decade of experiencing living and working in Asia has inspired him to found Fulcrum Strategic Advisors with a mission to help companies, governments, and individuals to understand the seismic shifts happening in the world today. Besides all these many activities, John is also the program director for the Asian Conference Board Sustainability Leaders Council. A very warm welcome to you, John.
Thank you very much.
John, your title of your book, Sustainability, the Rest of Us, No BS, 5-point Plan for Saving the Planet. And I can confirm, having read the book, it definitely doesn't contain any BS. And you do not mince your words. What made you choose that title? And in fact, what made you write this book?
Very good question. I suppose it's certainly to be provocative. I think that goes without saying. And the book, the inside of the book definitely fleshes that out, certainly my perspective on things. But what I really wanted to do, and I suppose the inspiration for the book, was just sitting back and, after being in the field for so long, sort of wondering, okay, where are we at? Where are we going? But after nearly 100 years of the modern environmental movement, why are we still having this conversation? It seems like it's cyclical, like we're having the same conversations we've been having for 50 years. So how can we move the needle a little more? And I felt that, as we'll probably get to in just a little while, being a little more provocative versus trying to be diplomatic may have been the right way forward. I think there's a lot of diplomacy in what we do, so I decided to take a different route.
I guess as a German, I can understand the sentiment. We're lacking very often that diplomatic touch. Yeah. As I see it, let me try to summarize you saying a few very important things. We have lost time by addressing the wrong issues the wrong way. One must have a critical mind and seek out the scientific facts. Nobody can solve the complex issues alone, but each of us can and should contribute. We must be consistent in the way what we do and how we do it. And companies can and will have a big role to play in all of this. And in essence, we have to get on with it. You call yourself a pragmatic altruist. Maybe you want to put my simplistic summary right.
I don't think it's simplistic. I think it's spot on. That's exactly what I'm getting to in the 5 points, but also the rest of the book. And I guess I'll start with the pragmatic altruist part, because that kind of bleeds throughout the entire book. It's sort of the red thread and what I'm encouraging readers to be as well. And I suppose what I mean by that is, a lot of us in this space, we're altruists by nature. We want to see positive change. We want to see good happen. And that's great. I think where we have gaps is in how we are pragmatic about our altruism. So do we do things with a strategy in mind? Maybe, maybe not. So what I'm encouraging throughout the book is for people to look a little more critically at how they approach whatever piece of saving the world is in their universe, by being a little more pragmatic, a little more strategic, and a little more thoughtful about how they're doing things. And I look at that through a number of different lenses, certainly starting with, I suppose, the marketing side of sustainability and how we show ourselves to the rest of the world. quite critical of how I believe we've sort of ostracized those that we're trying to bring into the fold in many different ways. But also encouraging people, as you mentioned, to really think about how they want to contribute. And I'm a big believer in being limited with how we try to save the world. As again, as altruists, we try to do so much, and that's great because we do care. But I think a lot of times by doing too much, you end up doing not very much at all. So really picking out what area of sustainability writ large you want to contribute to and focusing on that. There's plenty of us that care that will pick up the slack in other areas. And then the last part, certainly around the corporate world, I'm a big believer in, out of all the stakeholders in this conversation, the private sector really being the one that's going to push us forward. They have the means of capital access, certainly access to consumers, that can really help drive change in ways that both consumers and government really haven't shown as yet.
You've just made a number of important points. Let's go step by step. And I think maybe the way is we follow the structure of your book, and you are making 5 points. The first one is know what you're talking about. What do you mean?
Exactly. So I think a lot of times we don't, it's pretty basic. We don't understand what we're talking about. So if I asked 10 people to define for me what they think sustainability means, I'm going to get 100 different answers. That's not a very good starting point if we're supposed to be moving in the same direction, to not even be getting off on the same foot. So what I do is I go through a lot of the key terms just to dispel some of the myths or misunderstandings around the main terms within our practice. Certainly not saying that my terms are right, but at least the reader will understand what I mean by the things I'm talking about. So at least from that perspective, we're all on the same page. So certainly around the idea of, for example, sustainability being an umbrella term for everything from the environmental movement through to what happens in boardrooms of Fortune 500 companies. So really making sure we're all speaking the same language so that we are all talking to each other the right way. But certainly when it comes to folks outside of our practice, that we're speaking to them in ways that they understand. I think when we get into certainly the more scientific side of things and you're talking to a layperson, eyes are going to glaze over and they're not going to understand at all what you're talking about. So how do we approach those people in a way that they're going to understand what we mean and they're going to understand it the right way?
I to just harp on this a little bit more, my feeling is that I was very skeptical when the UN Sustainable Development Goals came out because they're pretty complex, 17 of them, and all of that. But I feel that at least in the corporate world, this has harmonized the perception of what the scope of sustainability is. Do you see this?
I agree 100%. I think it's done a really good job, certainly better than the MDGs did, to help us have a shared language and a shared understanding. And I think by being on one level, just the 17 goals, which is, I mean, it's not simplistic, but certainly it's streamlined. And then for those that want to dig down further into the however many sub goals, 196, is that how many there are now? It really does help to flesh out what we're talking about, and then it makes it very specific to an industry, a sector, and a particular business, so that it then resonates with them and they can make change.
Yeah, let me do a little bit of advertising for the conference board here then as well. We just published a report on the future of business and society, and in there we've made an attempt to turn the Sustainable Development Goals into something that is more attuned to corporations, because the goals have of course been developed for countries. So for anybody in the audience interested, you find that on our website. So that's enough of advertising from our side. Let's get back to your book, which is much more important for today. Your second point is quite interesting. You can do anything, but you cannot do everything. You have to read this almost twice. Yeah.
And that certainly goes to the point around altruists trying to do too much and end up doing not so much at all. So I give several examples, and I think for myself, as much as I would love to do so many, for example, I love animals. Am I going to be able to save every stray dog on the street and adopt them from the kennels? No, of course not. I don't have the means to do that. Are there people that will? Absolutely. There are people that have the means to work within that scope. I focus myself instead on a very niche area of sustainability, particularly around sustainability in the private sector. That's my thing. I may not be helping out in the other umpteen areas of sustainability, but that's sort of my piece of the universe, for lack of a better phrase. And I think and I encourage everyone to sort of pick their own piece of the universe with the understanding, again, that other people will take care of other areas. It's not all on us to do everything, because if we do try to take up the mantle of trying to do it all that's going to do is lead to burnout. We're going to become disgruntled because we're not going to see the change that us as individuals are trying to do across a million different areas. So just to be very strategic about what you want to do within our universe, but also capitalize on the strengths that you have. Maybe you are good at finance, contribute your talents that way. Don't contribute in ways that maybe don't capitalize on those great talents that you have. So really use that to your best benefit so that you're contributing in a way that makes you get up in the morning, that keeps your passion, and it doesn't sort of make you sad and disgruntled that you haven't achieved what you wanted to.
Now, there is another thought in this which I really liked in the book, which I hadn't considered so much, and your point is there are many people willing to do something, and if everybody focuses on something, by definition of the convergence, that will be more effective than many people trying to do many things and not achieving anything. So trusting that the others will fill the gaps because they have different capabilities, a different background, as long as we are going for the same goals, which we've just described with UN SDGs, then we will achieve more. I thought that was a very important extra thought.
And also the sort of converse of that, if everyone is trying to do the exact same thing, then we're going to miss out on all the other things that we need to do. If everybody wants to, I don't know, go read to children or dance with the elderly, right? If that's if that's the hot thing for the minute, then what about all the other issues that need to be addressed? So it sort of works both ways, and essentially it comes down to making sure we're dispersing ourselves to accomplish all the things that we need to accomplish. There's plenty of stuff to do.
You just worried me there for a second. Dance with the elderly. Nobody should try to dance with me. So let's not do that. No, fair point. Understood. Now I've done a little bit of censorship here. Your third point reads in the book is slightly different to how I express it now. You say, "Do not be a jerk."
That's a very good edit.
So what do you mean by that?
Sure. So in this section of the book, I'm primarily, and I hope it doesn't get me into trouble. It hasn't yet, but primarily talking to the segments within our world, our sustainability world, that would seek to ostracize versus incorporate folks. So at the end of the day, our audience, it's not ourselves, right? We know that we need to make change. We know the change that needs to happen. It's everybody that doesn't know they need to contribute. Those are the folks we should be talking to. So I think a lot of times, and I think I use vegans in the book as an example, or folks that are sort of in that realm where it's not easy to become a vegan, and folks by and large that are vegans, I'm painting with very broad strokes here, they don't encourage you to become it. They sort of see themselves as a unique clique, and that's kind of how it is, at least in my experience. And if we broaden that out to the rest of sustainability, I think a lot of times folks that are the most vocal within our practice kind of do the same thing, right? They make it difficult for people on the outside to come onto the inside, and that's what we need. We need everybody involved in this battle together. So you can't be a jerk about these things. You really do need to be open and welcoming for everybody that wants to help, because Lord knows not everybody wants to help us. We have more enemies than friends.
I think this is a very important point, and you write in your book about how in the past certain elements of this sustainability movement, if there's something like this, have been actually antagonizing people and then sidelining themselves and making something that is worthwhile to be the major agenda point a niche or a fringe thing. Um, uh, I know you worry to pick out anybody because you picked on the vegans, and people know that I've done that in the past as well. Not because we're against vegan as such. It's when it becomes
Yes.
dogmatic, and I think that's true for anything. The minute things become dogmatic, that means you're either with me or you're not with me, and if you're not with me, you're wrong. This is when the conversation stops. This is when the then we can't make any progress anymore, because progress comes out of discourse, discussion, um, uh, enlightenment, and I guess that's what what you're referring. So don't worry to point out one. There are many others, I think.
Yes, and it's
We
these.
could go for Tesla
Oh
drivers.
gosh.
Yeah, we could go for Tesla drivers.
This is true. There's several segments that for folks that read the book, they'll know I'm very vocal about particular segments as the quote unquote poster children for our movement. Maybe they shouldn't be the poster children anymore. Maybe we have better representatives that should be front and center, making sure we bring everybody along on the ride.
Yeah. No, okay. So we've hopefully steered away from trying to discriminate anybody. We just wanted to make a point, and the examples might not be the best ones we've just chosen here. By the way, I'm also driving a full electric car, and it's not a Tesla, but I can be sometimes a jerk about that to other people, so I have to be very careful what I say. Um, your next point is coming back to what we discussed in the beginning, be a pragmatic altruist. But I think we should talk about this a little bit more, because I thought when I read your book, as a person, I understand the point. When we make the point about corporations, it doesn't quite resonate as much. Maybe we can discuss this a little.
Sure, and I think the thing that immediately comes to mind when we talk about corporations not being pragmatically altruistic is the term greenwashing, and really saying you're doing one thing as a corporation when you're not. And I know there's been quite, at least I've seen quite a resurgence in greenwashing during COVID, and now sort of in the tail end of COVID, hopefully very soon, where corporations are again saying things that they're not actually doing. And I think that's being unpragmatic, right? Because eventually people will figure you out and they'll understand, oh, they're lying to me. I think consumers are much savvier than they maybe were 10 years ago with this stuff. So for corporations, it's really around, and I think a lot have already done this, a lot of the ones that are more advanced within the field of sustainability, looking at your organization, looking at where you can contribute, certainly from an employee perspective, how you approach, for example, CSR or strategic philanthropy within your organization. Are you doing a fun run just because the CEO thinks it's a good idea? Or if you're a buyer, for example, are you looking at how you can distribute medicines to disadvantaged populations, right? So, and there's plenty of statistics around why that makes more sense for a corporation to do versus just doing something off the cuff. So I think that really is an example of how a corporation can be strategically or pragmatically altruistic with the work that they're doing. As we talked about with individuals, are there particular areas within the corporation that are your strengths that maybe other industries or sectors or your competitors don't have that you can contribute to the conversation? So use that. Don't, as we gave the example before, don't just go dancing with seniors, right? Do something that's more niche and more geared toward what you're best at, and that way you're going to get the best results. There's plenty of, again, statistics on employee engagement when you approach things that way, productivity, etc. So that's from a corporate level how one could be more strategically or pragmatically altruistic. It's a tongue twister.
I I understand that. Let me make a point that I feel very strongly about it, and this is, as a corporation, even if you're not altruistic at all, you can make a huge impact on sustainability, and it makes a lot of business sense. We will not cover that today, but I think it's an important point, that the impact on sustainability depends on the capabilities of the companies and where you have the biggest material effects. Of course, you touch that in your book as well. I guess.
Absolutely, nodding my head very much on. It doesn't have to be altruistic. It does need to make business sense. If that leads you to great feelings of doing good, amazing. If it keeps you from it, then it's an issue. So don't worry about the altruism. Worry about how it impacts your business. Those of us in the field will take care of the rest for you.
Good point. Your last point, and quite right to be the last point, is do not try, do. Give us an example.
So I think a lot of times, and I use the example of how we market sustainability, or sort of what I would imagine being, an ad room at some agency on Madison Avenue in New York when they created the image of, what we think of as sustainability today. So sort of, if you're sitting watching a commercial, it's kind of this dystopian future, sort of a Mad Max burnt out sort of world, or it's the famous polar bear on the melting ice cap. It's all these images where, as a typical person watching this, you sort of sit back and you go, well, what am I supposed to do with all of that? Like, I'm just one person out of however many billion we have now on the earth. How am I supposed to affect any sort of change? And I think that stuns a lot of folks, makes them sort of like deer in the headlights, where it's too insurmountable of a problem. It's unrelatable, where people just sit back and go, I can't do anything about that. What I'm encouraging is, even if you feel that way, hopefully you don't, but even if you do, try to do something. Get out there and do something. And when you find something that resonates with you, something that you're contributing to and you're using your best strengths and capabilities with, stick with that. A lot of the examples I give are sort of times where people or organizations, certainly international organizations, dip their toe in, do a little bit, and then leave. There's several examples around celebrities doing this, where they'll go into some impoverished community, do some sort of silly program that really wasn't well thought out, throw a bit of cash around, get a good PR shoot out of it, and then leave and never come back. That's not the way to do things, because that doesn't contribute to long-term lasting impactful positive change. It actually, statistics have shown, does the opposite. So if we just go in and do something quickly and leave, it doesn't work like we think it does. So what I'm encouraging in the book is for people to really think about what they're doing. Again, be strategic, go in and contribute, and be there for the long term, to not only affect positive change in the long term, but that way you can see the impact of your work. If you're just hopping in and hopping out, can't see anything. Wouldn't you want to see the positive impact of what you're doing? So to definitely get out there and get it done. Time is of the essence.
Yeah, that is that sense of urgency comes very clearly through your book as well. So, yeah, thank you very much for raising the points, for being provocative. Middle of the road doesn't do it anymore. So, and it's very much geared to every person, but also corporations, or people working in corporations can take insights out of it. Now, you have worked through a lot of material in your book, and there's an impressive reference list at the end. My question to you would be, of course, one goes into writing a book with certain conceived ideas. I'm not saying preconceived ideas, conceived ideas, and that's good and great. But were there certain things when you start to dive deeper into it and looking at the material that you wanted to quote, that made you reconsider certain points of views?
There were, and I wanted to make sure that this could have very easily become a 200, 300 page rant, and I didn't want that. I wanted it to be very measured, but also a little ranty here and there, sure, because I'm passionate about these issues. But there were definitely pieces of information and pieces of research that had me sit back and say, well, I'd never considered that. Or, okay, that sort of led me down a rabbit hole in a lot of ways. Or even contributed to the flow and the content of the book in ways that I didn't think it would. And I think one of the big ones was this author, Jia Jiang, who wrote a book called Rejection Proof. And it's a hilarious book. It's been out for quite a while. And he's done TED Talks on this. But essentially what he did is he went out and he did 100 different exercises of things that normally people would say absolutely no to. So, for example, he went into, I'm probably going to get this very wrong, but he went into a McDonald's and asked for 100 hamburgers for free. Just some ridiculous off the wall thing. And what he found out is that a lot of times these situations where you would just think it would be an automatic no, people would say, okay, let's talk about it. Or, yeah, sure. Right. So all you have to do is ask. And sometimes you get amazing responses from things. And that really influenced a lot of the ideas in the book around trying and doing with sustainability, and certainly around sort of being focused on a particular area around sustainability. That was a very big inspiration and aha moment for me within the book. And I think another big one as well, and I sort of knew this tangentially, but it was the research around how Americans perceive sustainability. And as an American, I know we're not the best in the field, but just the number of people that still don't understand or are not in the fold or don't believe what's happening is amazing to me. And while that didn't necessarily influence my position in the book, and it's not something that in the 200 or so pages I wrote I can overcome, it was still something that made me, as somebody in the profession, sit back and go, oh, there's so much work still to do.
Yeah, that is very true when you have conversations, and it is amazing that sometimes very superficial statements suddenly spread around, and or very false statements have a persistence in the system that are amazing. Like, that fraud doctor who did an opportunistic certificate for a group of people in the UK, quoting that he had proof that vaccination against measles was causing autism. That is still around. It's completely fraudulent. He's been convicted for doing that, and people are still quoting that stuff. So I think one of the things that I've taken out of your book, and you've just proven it by talking about how you dealt with the materials, that you are a strong advocate to keep an open mind, but an open critical mind. Don't take anything at surface value. Go and dive a little bit deeper and then act on your conviction. So thank you so much, John, for that. And thank you. I know you're down in Melbourne. Is that down or up? I
think it's
don't
down.
Know.
Depending which way you're facing.
From where you are, it's up,
right.
I guess. So thank you for making that possible to talk about it. And for our audience, if you are looking for material that might challenge your way of thinking and giving you a good hands-on guidance, then go no further. Find John's book in any good bookstore. You can get it online. I got it on my can I say this, Kindle? Yeah, and it's worthwhile going for it. And to our audience, if you've enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe. Sorry, my goodness, to our off-the-shelf book discussion podcast series, or to explore the entire catalog of podcast programming from the Conference Board by visiting our website at tcb.org/podcast. Thank you for listening.
This has been Off the Shelf, a podcast by the Conference Board.